Hey beautiful people, welcome back. I'm just from celebrating my birthday with my family here in the city of Lusaka, Zambia, the home of the Victoria Falls. Today I just want to show you a very unique opening against the King's Pawn game as well as the Queen's Pawn game. I'm calling this the delayed caro-kann, where you need to play S6 first before doing anything else. For example, you know that the top played move from here is pawn to d4, most likely. Now this is when you can go pawn to S6, nothing wrong with this. It's not a blunder. If anything, you are just preparing for pawn to d5 now if white plays pawn to f4. For example, the top played moves here are knight c3, c4, f4, bishop d3, and even knight f3. And the most common one at the top level is knight c3. And this is the main reason why we play s6, so that now it makes sense for us to go d5. Because I mean, the moment your opponent plays knight c3, it means you're not going to face the deadly pen of attack. They are not going to play c4. So this is why I love playing pawn to s6 on the second move. No more seeing the pen of attack. So after d5, the only thing I can tell you is not to take. You can take on e4 if you want. It's not much of a stretch, but you know, I love seeing the move pawn to e5 here. I just want to play in the style of the semi-Slav with my light squared bishop out of the pawn chain and all that. So if my opponent plays pawn to e5, well and good. Now it is time for me to develop my light squared bishop. This is simply the advanced variation of the caro-kann, if you think about it, where we trade the light squared bishops like this before playing pawn to e6, kind of the semi-Slav once again. So because we do not have the light squared bishop, it now makes sense for us to place all of our pawns on light squares. That's the theory behind this. Whenever you see pawn to f4, just know your opponent might play f5 next. So to shut their dream for good, you can play g6, completing your color complex strategy by putting all your pawns on light squares since you don't have a light squared bishop. Or you can simply go pawn to c5 in this position. So many good things you can do. Knight e7, intending to go knight f5 is also a good option. You can play knight h6 also. I mean, so many good things that you can do in this position. I choose knight h6 because this also stops the move pawn to g4 if you think about it. If you just play knight e7, maybe your opponent is going to play g4. So remember this move, knight h6, if white plays pawn to f4. And you'll be good. If knight f3 comes, now this is when you can play c5 if you want, and knight c6, queen b6, bishop e7, castle short. I mean, because you already stopped pawn to g4, right? And that move. Sometimes you can also play knight f5, because if g4 happens, you always have knight h4 defended by your queen. Your idea is just to get rid of that knight on f3, or just retreat your knight back to g6. But always remember that your main pawn break will be on c5. And let me spoil it a little bit for you guys. You don't need to be castling short early. No, castling may wait. Most of the times you will be putting your king on d7 and it will be very safe. Sometimes even castling long after developing your queen's knight like this. So those are just some of the ideas you need to know. You don't need to know the moves. All you need to know is the plan. Again, after playing pawn to s6, if white doesn't play knight c3 and let's say they play c4 this time first, again, it's up to you to go d5 if you want, but be rest assured that white may take, and I mean, you're going to run into the panel. But even this is playable. Let's say pawn takes, and then they play knight c3. The thing is, you don't have to take because you're going to help them develop their bishop. The move you can play in this position is knight f6, and then you complete your development. But I'm not just a fan of this. Whenever I see c4, I like playing pawn to b5, kind of putting a question mark on this. Not the best thing you can do in this world, but it works, especially against fellow human beings. Point is, if they take, now you take back with your a pawn, you have a semi-open file, now ready to go pawn to d5. If they play d5 themselves, you just go knight f6. They can't push pawn to e5 due to knight takes. So that's how you play this position. After knight f6, consider playing d6 and play in the style of the Perk defense. That will transpose back to the Sicilian defense dragon variation if white takes on c6. This is the line that I like to play against the c4 line. Just going pawn to b5 and forget about it. If they play pawn to d5 immediately, first I have an option to take on d5. That's good. And they most of the times take back with their c pawn. And this is when it makes sense to kind of go back to the perk defense. Again, that will transpose back to the Sicilian dragon, where you need to develop your queen's knight on b6 later on, put your bishop on b7 and your queen's rook on c8. This is a very powerful thing. Another option that you can try if you don't like playing the Sicilian is this immediate pawn to e6 move. Point is, if they take, you first of all give a check with your bishop, and after knight d2, that's when you take on e6 with your d pawn. If bishop d2, you first of all exchange like that, and after knight takes, that's when you take, or if queen takes, you take back with your f pawn. You don't want to exchange queens just very early. This is also playable. So if pawn to c4, even though d5 is the main move, try pawn to b5, they are going to be confused. And in fact, after playing pawn to b5, not many of your opponents are going to push or take. They mostly play c5, and this is where you can play d5 immediately. Again, going back to, you know, some kind of the advanced variation of the caro-kann, this is deadly to play against stockfish, but not against human beings. The only advice I can give in these kinds of pawn structures where white has more central space is lock the center, put your king on the center, and start fighting on the sides. Don't be in a rush to castle shot. This is all I can say. Play e6 and g6. If need be, open the g file for your king's rook, put your king on d7 or hide it somewhere here. Besides, you can also start advancing the a pawn right away so that you lock the queen side completely. If they don't play c4 and let's say they go knight f3, once again you can play pawn to d5 if you want, but be rest assured this may most of the times transpose back to the pen of, but you always have an option to go pawn to b5. Not the best once again, but it works. d5, again knight f6. They won't have time to play e5 due to knight takes. If they take, you just take back with your knight, e5, knight g4. And look at that, you have g6, bishop g7 coming next. So you get back that pawn sooner or later. But our main goal is just to force our opponent to go back to the advanced variation of the caro-kann. One common move you're going to see over and over is this variation, pawn to f4. Whenever you see this, just go pawn to d5 now. It makes sense because white is going to have a lot of gaps if they play pawn to c4. So they most of the times go pawn to e5. And now this is when you can go bishop f5. Kind of the Brooklyn variation of the caro-kann that I showed you last week, if you think about it. Again, if bishop d3, you always want to exchange like that. In this particular position, you can even play knight h6. It's optional because if bishop takes, you can simply take back. Again, if pawn to g4, you always have knight h4 followed by pawn to e6. Let's say f5, this is what they like doing. You go pawn to e6. They can't play e6 due to this. Now it looks like you might lose your knight. Maybe if they play bishop that and that, well, first you have knight g2 check and you're going to win back that piece. So they can't do that. If knight h3, you can even play bishop e7. You continue with your normal development. In this position, g5, knight takes f5. Or let's say pawn takes. In most cases, you don't even need to take back. Trust me, you just castle short. Looks like you're going to be down a pawn, but you're going to have some piece activity going on the king side. Sometimes you can take, it's not much of a stretch. So this is just how to handle this position. Feel free to always play knight h6 whenever white plays f4. Now it is time for me to demonstrate how powerful this opening can be on leeches. Let's see how things will go. And hey, this goes to my Indian friends. I heard your complaints. You can now purchase my courses in rupees. Just visit KaspaChess.com. The link is in the comment section down below. By the way, that's just how you support this channel, for God's sake. Anyway, let's proceed. Okay, let's go with the caro-kann defense. I want to play the delayed caro-kann because if I just play pawn to d5 right away, maybe my opponent will take on d5 and play the pan of attack later on. So let me test their patience by playing s6. Okay, so this is one, opening that you're going to see from time to time. And one thing I love about this is that it kind of forces my opponents to play pawn to e5 in the long run, which I always want to see on the board. And now I think I can play pawn to b5 for a reason. Great stuff. Now this position looks good for me to fianchetto on the king side, but not before playing pawn to d5. Take with 10%. I'm going to take with the queen. Okay, so this is what I talked about, you guys. This looks as if white is doing better, but if you think about it, this is just an overextension. Pawns don't go backwards. This is one thing you should know. So be mindful whenever you are moving your pawns. Don't just move them anyhow. They don't go backwards. So now these pawns are deadlocked. I can just play e6 now. Of course, f4 is going to come, but I have pawn to g6, and if I want, I'm going to open up the g file for my rook. And before I play pawn to g6, maybe knight e7 makes a lot of sense to put my knight on f5. If pawn to g4, I have knight h4, by the way. And I guess g6 now is playable. I still have knight h4. So this is how you play it safe. Thinking of what to do next. Maybe bishop e7, but what am I going to do if that comes? Let me play... Can I play h5? And bishop h6? Or maybe let me play... I don't know. Maybe bishop g7. Or h6. I'm trying to see what my opponent is up to with this move. Are they going to play g4? I'll be happy to go knight h4 so that I take back with my queen. My queen needs to be active. Okay, now this is clear. My opponent is not going to play pawn to g4. So I can just as well play bishop e7. Maybe to force a trade here. You know what I want to do? I don't want to castle short, because I have a point of attack on the king side. If you think about it, this can be thought of as a pawn sacrifice in some way, but I have my bishop there, so it's not a sacrifice. So you've seen what I've done, just opening up the king side. And guess where I'm going to put my king? On d7. I don't even care about my queen's knight anymore, because I can develop my rook like that. If I'm bothered, I'll play knight b d7, knight f8, and knight g6. That'll be a great knight maneuver if you think about it. Guess my opponent wants to play this move, but I do not care. Let's do this. Can I take? Yes. Now this messes up my opponent's structure on the king side. Now knight g6 is coming. Still, white can't take on g5. This is very good, you guys. By the way, you can play this delayed caro-kann even against the queen's pawn game. So with this move, I just want to castle my king here. So take on h8, then put my queen on g7. I feel I don't have any weaknesses so far, although someday my opponent will have to start attacking from that side of the board, so I still need to be careful somehow. And maybe that's where my dark squared bishop will become useful, because it needs to guard that spot. So let's do this first. This opening is also for those who want to play positional chess plus defensive chess. I'm thinking of advancing my g-pawn now, but there's... By the way, white should have taken on the previous move. That's just a free pawn, but maybe they are scared I'm up to something or something like that. Maybe I have knight takes e5, discovery or something like that. Let's see what my opponent is going to do. I can't judge. Since they don't want to take this pawn, let's do this. Now I have a semi-open file. Oh, this is just a clear open file. In fact, I can take now, right? Take, give a check. And give a check. Yep. Look at this. This is so bad for my opponent. Yeah, they just hung their rook. Now I can take. And take the free rook. So now it's game over. So my idea is to play knight f5. Yes, so that's how you play the delayed caro-kann, you guys. Just play it safe, play it cool, ensure that you don't have much weaknesses, and don't be in a rush to castle short. That's just my advice, free advice. Yes. Now, go and check out 3 of my new courses on my website KaspaChess.com that I highly recommend you get right now. The newly updated Semi-Slav defense against d4, the knight c6 Nimzowitsch defense, and the mighty e5 Paris defense, which is my best selling course till this date. Chess is a school on its own, and you will just need to show some efforts to unlock some secrets that content creators don't show on YouTube. And that's how you support this channel, by the way.